This constitutes a security hazard.
Look, I'm going to be honest with you guys. I don't like Funko Pops very much. These are the only ones that I own. They're Thunderbirds ones. It's Brains, Penelope and Parker. And, well, let's get into it. The reason I'm even talking about these is because they sit on my shelves, staring blankly at me with their cold, dead eyes. And I thought, well, I should put them to some use. So here they are on Security Hazard Minis, and I'm going to talk about them today. They were made in 2019, which I think is really interesting because they sort of came along just after the really big sort of push towards new Thunderbirds merchandise in 2015 to tie in with the 50th anniversary. These came along sort of a little bit after that in 2019, and well, they have that flavor about them of just not having a huge amount of care and effort put into them, which I'm sad to say, is indicative of some of the merchandise that, came out around that time. I think it's gotten better. I think it's gotten a lot better. I think since, I actually genuinely think since Anderson Entertainment sort of stepped in and started making models and, figures and things like that of their own, it kind of demonstrated to, I think, like ITV, who hold the license for Thunderbirds, probably demonstrated to them, oh, this stuff can be done to a good standard and people will therefore buy it. There was probably a sort of sense of, well, people will buy Thunderbirds Funko Pops because Funko Pops are really popular, so of course people will buy Thunderbirds ones of them, but not really understanding the nuances of where the target audience is and things like that. But there we go. So Funko Pops, if you're not familiar, like I am really not familiar with them, but Funko Pops are basically a range of statuettes, I guess you would call them, made of vinyl plastic, and they've basically done. Think of any movie franchise or TV show with a sort of sci-fi, fantasy, nerdy sort of angle on it. Think about comic books, all of that sort of stuff. Funko have almost certainly made one of these little figures based on those shows. And when they said they were going to do Thunderbirds ones, I was kind of like, that's an odd choice. Because although Thunderbirds is very respected, well known, it is also, it doesn't fall into line with things like Marvel or DC or Stranger Things or anything like that. It doesn't have that same flavor about it. So I was very curious why they even decided, yeah, we'll make some Thunderbirds ones. Why not? We'll test the water. And this very much feels like we have tested the water here. They made these three figures because they are the most recognizable Thunderbirds characters. Not necessarily the most important ones, it has to be said, but they are the most recognizable. Brains, Penelope, Parker. Those are the ones that if you spoke to someone in the street who knew nothing about Thunderbirds and you showed them these characters, they stand the best chance of recognizing them. So from that point of view, that's why these were chosen. And it's very clear they tested the water. They went, yep, we'll make 3 Thunderbirds, pop figures. Why not? And then they didn't make any more. These were done in 2019. I think it's fair to say that they're not going to come out with any more of them. And I can immediately understand why, because it doesn't fit into what Funko Pops are really all about, which is, if you're dealing with something like Marvel superheroes, and I know nothing about any of those big franchises at all. I just do not get involved in that sort of stuff. It just doesn't interest me. But the reason why you might want a range of figures where all of the characters look pretty much exactly the same is because you're going to do things like different costume variations and different limited edition, very specific niche versions of those individual characters that people who are really into that sort of stuff, and more importantly, who will pay to collect every single possible version of something, that's who Funko Pops are made for. Thunderbirds does not have that same appeal to it. Yes, different versions of the characters do have different variations and different costumes and different scenarios that they're used in, but it's never been a selling point of the series. That's just not what people buy merchandise for. So the fact that they only did 3 of these particular characters just tells me that it wasn't the right fit. But nevertheless, we're gonna dive in. We're gonna take a look at them, and I will probably complain a little bit about these figures, both as they are, but also just about Funko Pops in general, because I don't like the style of them at all. I don't like the blank expressions, the uniformity, the giant heads, which are out of proportion with the bodies, which I know is ironic considering we're talking about Thunderbirds puppets, but it just doesn't appeal to me. They don't look nice. There's no pleasant. It's just not a pleasant thing for me, at least to look at. But anyway, let's start with Brains, because I think Brains, to be honest, is actually my favorite out of these, just because you have the giant blue glasses obscuring the lack of detail in the face. So automatically it kind of has more appeal to me because of that. Yeah, I think the glasses are what really sell this figure, because if you didn't have the glasses on, he would look like any other person, really. He wouldn't have a distinctive feature to set him apart from any other character. So therefore, yeah, I like the glasses. I actually think they're finished really well. I like the sort of lenses that they managed to put into them. So that's all good. These figures are not necessarily finished to the highest possible standard. Like, there's some sort of flaking, I don't know if that's paint or glue or plastic or what that is, but there's a mark on his hair that I cannot get rid of. I don't know what that is, but these things have basically sat on a shelf since I've got them out of the box, so I don't know how that would have happened. I have 1 point of articulation, which is the head can spin all the way around. That's why they're kind of more, I wouldn't call them figures, as statuettes, I guess, but they're plastic, so maybe not even that. I don't know. Anyway, they just stand there, basically. That's what they're for. They're just meant to stand there. And again, if you're the sort of person who gets more of a buzz out of collecting and having one of everything, then of course you're not even going to take this out of the box. It's just going to sit inside of that window box there, never to come out, never to be seen, whatever. But as you can see from looking behind me, that's not the way I do things. I am much more the sort of person who wants things out of the box so that I can see them, so that I can probably pick them up and have a look at them. It's just unfortunate that Funko Pops actually aren't really designed for that. They're designed to sit inside of a box and just exist. So there they are. Anyway, that was Brains. By the way, costume-wise, I think probably they based that look off of, there's one particular promo photo that was taken of Brains that you see on packaging for all sorts of different things. They've pretty much tried to copy that exactly as it is. So, it's slightly disappointing because you're not even really getting a look that he's particularly recognizable for in the TV show. It's just sort of generic scientist man costume. But there you go. Speaking of which, here's Penelope. Now, Penelope, you're always going to have a hard time capturing Penelope's likeness in a minimalist sort of way like this, because the character is one of the least caricatured faces, like in terms of the actual original puppets. She's one of the more realistic looking puppets in the show. So when it comes to doing a Funko Pop of her, yeah, the face is pretty blank. They've given her some nice eyelashes, and that's about it as far as detail is concerned. The hair is close enough, I suppose, to what Penelope might have sometimes had. But you think of all the classic Penelope looks. I mean, so many, it's such an extravagant wardrobe and, so many different hairstyles and things like that. They've gone for the most basic, the most generic, the most standard thing. And it's just a bit disappointing, And particularly when you get to the costume has so blatantly just been copied off of one particular promo photo, which again, it's a promo photo that you see all over the place, where it's her in the pink suit carrying that flower. They've literally copied the flower. They've put a flower in her hand. I'm like, if you were going to give Penelope an accessory, why not like her powder compact or something like that, something she actually uses in the show? No, instead you just looked at one photograph and went, yep, well, we'll just make that. We'll just have that. So there she is. The only other thing to talk about with Penelope is she comes with a stand because her feet are much smaller and daintier than the two gentlemen, that she needs a stand. I assume that's a standard thing that they probably do on lots of different Funko Pops, but just thought I'd point it out because it's there. And then we get to Parker. Speaking of, feet and being unstable on his feet, ever since I've gotten this thing out of the box, his feet are sort of curved and bent in such a way that it is really difficult, there we go, really difficult to get him to stand up. He can just about stay put if I leave him like that. But yeah, he falls over way too easily, which of course, he's got a massive head and a massive hat on top of his head. So yeah, of course that's going to be an issue. But it just speaks to the sort of, they're just not the best. It's just not the best quality materials. The fact that one of his feet just fell off. That was not expected. Does that just slot back in? Gosh, I probably, in their defense, I probably spent so much time trying to sort of flex the feet back into position that I probably have loosened the feet slightly and made them do that. But incredible. Wow. Really, really something. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the capturing the likeness of Parker, they've gone to a little bit of effort because obviously Parker is that much more caricatured than so many of the other Thunderbirds characters. They've got the big nose. Well, again, big in Funko Pop terms, not actually that distinctive, but it's slightly more distinctive than other Funko Pops. So there you go. They've given him the sort of lidded eyes, and bags under the eyes as well, and the big eyebrows. They've captured the key aspects of him, but I wouldn't necessarily say it looks like Parker. As far as the costume is concerned, they've gone for the chauffeur look as opposed to the butler look, but the accuracy of the uniform is not great. I mean, I never would have said it was that brown. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would have considered it more of a sort of, I suppose, a sort of dark grey verging towards brown, but they've obviously tried to make this look bright and colourful, so they've gone, well, we'll just make it sort of more vivid brown. It's just very generic, very basic, And it would have been lovely if more Thunderbirds Funko Pops had been made. Maybe as a collection, you would have started to see variations in the different costumes they might have done for different characters and things like that. And that would have given it a certain appeal as a whole, as a collection. But as just these three and no more, it's very, very lacking. It's a very kind of poor showing. Obviously, it would have been good to see the other, like the Tracy brothers. I'm kind of surprised they never did the Tracy brothers, just because they could have literally recycled the same bodies just in the uniforms with the sash and just painted the sash a different color on each of them. But no, they decided, no, we'll just stick with the people that people recognize from Thunderbirds, even though I would argue that the Tracy brothers are probably the more recognizable characters, even if you don't know the names of them or whatever. They're still the thing when you think of Thunderbirds. Those are the guys in the blue uniforms. That's what you think of. So yeah, very very muddled and just very, very basic, very generic, very straightforward. So, they exist. If you collect Funko Pops, then, I'm sure you'll enjoy these as much as any other Funko Pop in your collection. probably. I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't speak your language. Don't understand. I don't understand the appeal at all. Just in general, always makes me really sad when I walk into a shop like Forbidden Planet or any sort of nerdy comic book, sci-fi, fantasy type shop, and all I see is a row of Funko Pops. I just go, wow, that's a little bit depressing. So just not my favorite thing. Not my favorite thing. But yeah, I mean, if you collect Funko Pops, let me know actually how these stand up to other Funko Pops. Are they lesser quality, better quality? Has more effort been put into these than would normally go into a Funko Pop? I don't know. So do let me know about that. And just very, very grateful that there are other much, much better ranges of Thunderbirds figures and toys and vehicles and models and that sort of thing that we can enjoy in addition to this sort of stuff. So anyway, there we go. Thank you very much for watching. I promise that my videos are not normally this grumpy. I realize I sound like just a bitter old man when I'm talking about these things. So I do apologize for that. I promise normal service will resume next week in the next Security Hazard Mini. So until then, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.
Security hazard negative.